The most amusing thing about humans, we always thought, was how adorably primitive they were. At least that's what we believed until that fateful day on Europa Station 7. Another broken artifact, I asked, watching my research assistant struggle with the ancient device. My antennae twitched with mild irritation, a habit I'd never managed to break in my 300 cycles as lead archaeologist for the Galactic Heritage Foundation. Professor Nix Valerian, that's me. The one who accidentally stumbled upon the greatest cover-up in galactic history. But let me start from the beginning, back when we still thought humans were the galaxy's cute little newcomers. Professor Valerian Lyra Starweaver called out, her bioluminescent spots pulsing with excitement. You need to see this right now. I grumbled my way across the excavation site, my feet crunching through the perpetual frost of Europa's surface. The forgotten moon base stretched out before us, a relic we'd initially dismissed as just another abandoned human outpost. How wrong we were. This better be worth interrupting my morning meditation. Lyra, I said, ducking under a partially collapsed doorway. You know how grumpy I get without my daily dose of cosmic harmony. Trust me, Professor. This changes everything we thought we knew about human history. I looked down at the artifact in Lyra's trembling hands. At first glance, it appeared to be a standard data storage device, the kind our civilizations had used about 10,000 years ago. Except there was one small problem. This was a human facility. And according to every historical record we had, humans had only achieved spaceflight a mere 500 years ago. Well, that's inconvenient, I muttered, taking the device from Lyra. Have you verified the dating? 17 times, she replied, her spots now pulsing in a pattern that indicated extreme anxiety. The quantum decay signature is unmistakable. This device is at least 12,000 years old. I laughed nervously. Clearly our equipment needs recalibration. Perhaps the Europa radiation is interfering with the readings, but even as I spoke those words, my scientific mind was already racing through the implications. The humans we'd encountered 5 centuries ago had seemed so charmingly primitive. Their first interstellar ships were practically held together with what they called duct tape, a fixing material that had become something of a running joke in galactic engineering circles. The Galactic Council had taken humanity under its wing, like a parent guiding a wobbly child's first steps. We shared our technology, our knowledge, our wisdom. And the humans? They smiled, thanked us profusely, and bumbled their way into the galactic community with what we thought was endearing clumsiness. Professor Lyra's voice interrupted my thoughts. There's more. She led me deeper into the facility, past corridors that seemed to laugh at our assumptions. The architecture itself should have been our first clue. It was too perfect, too precise for what we believed to be early human engineering. We entered what appeared to be a control room. Holographic interfaces flickered to life as we approached, responding to our presence with a level of technological sophistication that shouldn't have existed in a 12,000-year-old facility. Oh, those clever little monkeys, I whispered, watching as star charts materialized before us. The displays showed celestial bodies in positions that perfectly matched astronomical calculations for that distant era. This wasn't some elaborate hoax or malfunction. Should we notify the council? Lyra asked, her spots now a confused swirl of colors. I snorted, a very unprofessional sound that echoed through the ancient chamber. And tell them what? That the supposedly young species we've been patronizing for 5 centuries might actually be older than our entire civilization. Well, when you put it that way. Exactly, I started pacing, my antennae now twitching so violently they probably looked like dancing tentacles. We need more evidence, hard evidence, the kind that even those stuffed robes on the council can't ignore. I picked up another artifact, turning it over in my hands. It was a simple thing, really. A mug, preserved perfectly in the airless environment, with words printed on its side, "Humans were here first." Those smug little, I couldn't even finish the sentence. 5 centuries of accepting our guidance with those pleasant, patient smiles. 5 centuries of thank you so much, and we have so much to learn, and oh, how fascinating your technology is. Professor Lyra's voice had taken on a worried tone. Are you all right? Your scales are turning purple. Oh, I'm fine, I replied, carefully setting down the mug before I crushed it in my growing agitation. I'm just realizing that we might be the galaxy's longest-running joke. A soft beep drew our attention to one of the holographic displays. Text began scrolling across it in ancient human script, which I'd naturally learned to read as part of my archaeological studies. "Welcome back to Europa Station 7," it read. "We've been expecting you." "That's impossible," Lyra whispered. "This facility has been abandoned for millennia." I stared at the next words appearing on the screen and felt my professional skepticism crumbling by the second. "The truth will come out when you're ready for it. For now, just remember sometimes the best way to teach someone is to let them think they're teaching you." Standing there in that ancient control room, surrounded by evidence that shattered everything we thought we knew about human history, I couldn't help but laugh. It was either that or scream. Because suddenly every interaction I'd ever had with humans needed to be reevaluated. Every patient nod as we explained advanced concepts to them. Every grateful smile as we shared our superior technology. "Lyra," I said, watching more text appear on the screen, "I believe we've just discovered that we're not the teachers we thought we were." "Then what are we?" "The galaxy's most oblivious students." I shook my head, my antennae finally settling into an amused droop. "And the humans? They might just be the most patient teachers in history. What do you mean you're denying our request for additional funding?" I stood in Director Andromeda Thal's office, trying very hard not to let my scales shift to angry red. "We found evidence that could rewrite galactic history." Director Thal looked up from her holo display with 3 of her 7 eyes, which was about as much attention as she usually spared for anyone below her rank. "Professor Vallerine, do you know how many grant requests I received claiming to rewrite galactic history? 17 this week alone. But we have proof." I projected the findings from Europa Station 7 onto her desk. "The quantum dating is conclusive. The architectural precision is beyond anything humans should have been capable of 12,000 years ago. And look at these energy signatures." "What I'm looking at," she interrupted, now deigning to use 4 eyes, "is a waste of the Galactic Heritage Foundation's resources. Humans achieved spaceflight 500 years ago. This is established fact." "Established propaganda, more likely," I muttered, then quickly added, "With all due respect, Director." She finally gave me her full 7-eyed attention. "Not a good sign. Professor Vallerine, your work has always been eccentric, but this crosses into dangerous territory. The humans are our proteges, our students. Suggesting otherwise could destabilize centuries of peaceful cooperation." "Truth tends to do that," I replied, my antennae twitching in barely contained frustration. "Your request is denied. Stick to cataloging their early space stations and leave the conspiracy theories to the entertainment networks." I left her office feeling deflated but not defeated. In my 3 centuries of archaeological work, I'd learned that bureaucrats might control the funding, but they couldn't control curiosity, and mine was now burning hotter than a plasma drive. Back at the excavation site, Lyra greeted me with news that made my scales ripple with excitement despite my mood. "We found more, Professor. An entire sealed chamber, untouched since the facility was abandoned." The chamber turned out to be a data archive, its walls lined with preservation units that hummed to life as we entered. Inside each unit, data crystals gleamed with stored information that had waited millennia to be discovered. "How many of these can we decrypt?" I asked, already mentally calculating how long we could continue working without official funding. "That's the thing," Lyra said, her bioluminescent spots dancing with barely contained excitement. "They're not encrypted. They're just waiting." I picked up one of the crystals, examining its perfectly preserved structure, almost like they were left here for us to find, Lyra finished. "Exactly." I connected the crystal to our analysis equipment. "Let's see what stories you've been keeping." The data streamed across our screens, showing images and text that couldn't possibly exist. Humans, in advanced spacesuits that made our current technology look primitive, building outposts across the solar system. Detailed maps of long-abandoned colonies on Mars, Venus, and dozens of moons. And most incredibly, records of their first encounters with other species, encounters that, according to official history, hadn't happened yet. "This can't be right," Lyra whispered. According to these records, humans had achieved interstellar travel before most of our species had discovered basic tool use. The question is, I said, my scientific mind racing with possibilities, why did they hide it? And why leave evidence for us to find? Perhaps I can help answer that. We spun around to find a human standing in the doorway. She wore the simple environmental suit typical of human researchers, but something about her bearing made me suspect it wasn't her usual attire. Amanda Blackwood, she introduced herself with that characteristic human smile, the one I was starting to suspect meant far more than simple friendliness. I'm a consultant with the Earth Historical Archives. How did you get in here? Lyra demanded, her spots pulsing with alarm. The same way you did, Amanda replied, walking over to examine our equipment with what I now recognized as carefully crafted casualness. Though I've known about this facility quite a bit longer. You knew? I asked, my antennae quivering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. About all of this. Professor Valérien, she said, turning to face me, would you believe me if I told you that humanity has been waiting centuries for someone like you? Someone curious enough to look past the obvious, clever enough to piece together the clues, and... She glanced at the denied funding request still displayed on my tablet, stubborn enough to persist when told to stop. Why the deception? I asked. Why pretend to be technologically primitive? Amanda's smile took on a hint of sadness. Imagine being the first spacefaring race, watching younger species emerge, make the same mistakes you did, fight the same wars, face the same crises. Would you immediately reveal your power and risk becoming the galaxy's rulers? Or would you choose a more subtle path? You chose to be students rather than teachers, I realized, remembering all those patient human faces in cultural exchange programs. We chose to let the galaxy develop without the shadow of an elder race hanging over it, Amanda corrected. To guide without controlling, to suggest without commanding. And now? Lyra asked. Now, Amanda said, reaching for one of the data crystals, it's time for the next phase. But we need help. We need allies who understand both the truth and why we hid it. She inserted the crystal into our equipment, and new data flooded the screens. Star charts showing thousands of worlds I'd never seen before, technical specifications that made my scientific mind spin, and lists of threats to galactic stability that made my scales pale. Director Thal was right about one thing, Amanda said quietly. This will destabilize everything. The question is, Professor Valérien, are you ready to help us ensure that destabilization leads to growth rather than chaos? I looked at the data streaming before us, at Lyra's worried expression, at Amanda's knowing smile. 5 centuries of guided development, 12,000 years of hidden history. And now, standing in an ancient archive that had waited millennia for this moment, I had to make a choice. Tell me everything, I said. Amanda's smile widened. That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. The next few days passed in a blur of revelations that made my head spin. Amanda showed us evidence that would have made Director Thal's 7 eyes pop out of her head. Not that we could tell her. The politician in her would probably have us all arrested for galactic treason. So let me get this straight, I said, examining a holographic display of Earth's true historical timeline. Your people achieved faster than light travel before my species learned to make fire. Actually, Amanda replied, swiping through more classified files, we helped several species discover fire. Accidentally dropped a few torches here and there. Clumsy us. You're joking, I stared at her. Please tell me you're joking. Her only response was that infuriating human smile. Lyra burst into our makeshift command center, her spots pulsing with alarm. Security teams. The director sent security teams to shut down our dig site. Right on schedule, Amanda said calmly, not even looking up from her work. Schedule, I demanded. You knew this would happen. Professor Valérien, we've been playing this game for 12,000 years. Trust me, bureaucratic overreaction is always on schedule. Through the window, I could see the security vehicles approaching across Europa's icy surface. Their lights cut through the perpetual twilight like angry red eyes. We need to protect the evidence, I said, reaching for the data crystals. Oh, those, Amanda waved dismissively. They're just copies. The originals were moved to safe storage centuries ago. We've been waiting for someone to find these particular ones for, about 70 years now. My antennae drooped in confusion. You planned all of this? Not exactly. We planned multiple possibilities. You're actually Plan M. Plans A through L didn't work out quite as well. What happened to those researchers? Became quite successful writers of speculative fiction, actually. Very creative theories. Before I could process that particular revelation, Director Thal's voice boomed through the facility's communication system. Professor Nix Valérien, you are ordered to cease all unauthorized research activities immediately. Surrender any artifacts or data you have collected to the security teams. Amanda finally looked up from her work. And that's my cue. Professor M.S. Starwaver, would you like to see why humans always seemed so fascinated by our transportation technology? She pressed something on her wrist device, and the world shifted. One moment we were in the research facility, the next we were standing in what appeared to be a vast underground chamber filled with advanced technology that made our most sophisticated equipment look like children's toys. Welcome to the real Europa Station 7, Amanda announced. But we were just in Europa Station 7, Lyra stammered, her spots now strobing in confusion. No, you were in what we like to call our starter pack. Think of it as a test facility. If someone finds it and asks the right questions, they get invited to the real thing. I looked around at the impossibly advanced facility. How many of these do you have? Enough, Amanda replied cryptically. Now, shall we discuss why we've been letting the galaxy think we're the new kids on the block? A massive holographic display activated, showing what looked like a map of the entire galaxy. But this was no ordinary star chart. It showed patterns, connections, and threats I'd never imagined existed. Humanity's great burden, Amanda explained, is knowing too much too soon. We achieved technological advancement before we achieved wisdom. It didn't go well. The myths about Earth's near destruction, I whispered. They're not myths, are they? We almost wiped ourselves out half a dozen times before we learned our lesson. That's why, when we finally reached the stars and found other emerging civilizations, we made a choice. The display zoomed in on various worlds, showing the early development of different species. My own people were there, taking their first steps towards civilization, while human observers watched unseen. Instead of conquering or controlling, we decided to guide. To let each species develop at their own pace, make their own mistakes, but with a safety net they never knew existed. The bumbling newcomers act, I realized. It was all to avoid becoming. The oppressive elder race, Amanda nodded. Every species that discovers it's not alone faces a choice. Submit to the stronger civilization or fight against it. We wanted to offer a third option. But why reveal the truth now? The display shifted again, showing dark patterns moving at the galaxy's edge. Because something's coming. Something that will require all of us working together as equals, not as teachers and students. A security alarm blared through the facility. Somewhere above us, Director Thal's teams were probably discovering our disappearance. It's time to make a choice, Professor Amanda said. You can go back up there, pretend you never saw any of this. Write it off as a failed excavation, or you can help us prepare the galaxy for the truth. Not as a student, not as a teacher, but as a partner. I looked at Lyra, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. Her spots had settled into a pattern I'd never seen before, one that somehow conveyed both terror and excitement. Will there be more terrible human jokes about accidentally teaching fire-making, I asked. Amanda grinned. Oh, Professor Valérien, you haven't even heard our best material yet. Above us, security forces were probably tearing apart an empty research station, looking for evidence that had never really been there. And here we stood in a hidden facility that rewrote everything we thought we knew about human history. When do we start, I asked. We already have, Amanda replied. In fact, we're running ahead of schedule. Would you like to see what Plan N looks like? The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council wasn't designed to hold this many beings. Representatives from every known species packed the towering amphitheater, their combined voices creating a storm of whispers that made my antennae vibrate. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Amanda as we waited in the preparation chamber. "Once we step out there, everything changes." "Honestly? No, I'm not sure. Humanity has been debating this moment for centuries, but our sensors confirm it. We're out of time for gentle guidance." Director Thal burst into the chamber, all 7 eyes blazing with fury. "Professor Valerian, you are formally charged with data theft, unauthorized research," and she paused, glaring at Amanda, "consorting with potentially dangerous elements." "Dangerous elements?" Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Director, you have no idea how funny that accusation is." Before Thal could respond, the council bells rang, signaling the start of the emergency session. We filed into the grand chamber, and I felt thousands of eyes, optical sensors, and various sensory organs turned toward us. Council Speaker Zara Brightstar, her crystalline form catching the light from distant stars through the chamber's transparent dome, called for order. "We are gathered here due to disturbing claims made by Professor Nix Valerian and representatives of the Human Cooperative. Professor, you may present your evidence." I stepped forward, trying to keep my scales from betraying my nervousness with color changes. "Honorable Council, what I am about to show you will challenge everything we believe about our galactic history." The chamber's holographic systems activated, displaying the evidence we'd gathered, but not the simple ruins we'd found in the fake Europa Station 7. No, Amanda had given me access to the real records. 12,000 years ago, I began. When most of our species were taking their first steps toward civilization, humanity had already reached the stars. The chamber erupted in shouts and protests. Council Speaker Brightstar had to strike her resonance rod 3 times to restore order. "Preposterous," Director Thal shouted. "Humans achieved spaceflight only 5 centuries ago. We have documentation." "You have what we wanted you to have," Amanda said, stepping forward. Her simple environmental suit shimmered and transformed, revealing ceremonial armor of impossible technology. The chamber fell silent. "Humanity faced a choice when we first reached the stars," she continued. "We could dominate, rule, impose our will on emerging civilizations. We had the power. We still do. But we chose a different path." She raised her hand, and the holographic display expanded to show the true scope of human achievement. Hidden worlds, advanced technologies, and most shockingly, evidence of their subtle guidance throughout history. "That's impossible," someone in the chamber whispered. "The great innovation of the Palaxian age that was." "A human suggestion, carefully placed," Amanda confirmed. "Just like the quantum breakthrough of the synthetics, the biological revolution of the Zarn, and yes, Director Thal, even your species' famous discovery of neural enhancement." The chamber erupted again, but this time in a chaos of questions and realizations. Species after species recognizing moments in their history where human influence had guided them away from disaster. "But why?" Council Speaker Brightstar asked, her crystalline form vibrating with emotion. "Why hide your true nature?" "Because of what's coming," I said, bringing up the long-range sensor data from the real Europa Station. "Show them, Amanda." The holographic display shifted to show the approaching threat. A vast darkness between the stars, moving with purpose. "We call them the Devourers," Amanda explained. "They consume civilizations, transform entire galaxies into empty, processed husks. We've fought them before, in other galaxies, other times. But we knew we couldn't face them alone. Not again. So instead of creating an empire," I continued, finally understanding the full scope of humanity's plan, they created a community. Instead of subjects, they wanted allies. And now Amanda said, "We need those allies more than ever." The chamber had fallen completely silent. Thousands of beings trying to process not only the revelation of humanity's true nature, but the threat approaching their galaxy. Then Director Thal, of all people, began to laugh. "All this time," she said, her 7 eyes blinking in sequence, "we thought we were the teachers." "To be fair," Amanda replied with that familiar human smile, "you taught us quite a bit. We just had a few prerequisites you didn't know about." Council Speaker Brightstar raised her resonance rod. "The Council must verify these claims." Of course, Amanda nodded. She pressed a control on her armor, and suddenly the space above the Council chamber shimmered. A massive human vessel appeared, its design unlike anything we'd seen before. More ships emerged from whatever dimensional space they'd been hiding in, forming a fleet that stretched beyond sight. The human technologies you've seen, Amanda announced, are what we chose to share. This is what we chose to hide. Not out of fear or malice, but out of hope that when this day came, you would stand with us as equals, not bow to us as superiors. The chamber exploded in a cacophony of voices, but Council Speaker Brightstar's voice cut through them all. And if we choose not to stand with you, then we will stand alone, as we have before, Amanda replied quietly. And we will do our best to protect you anyway, as we always have. I looked around the chamber, seeing the shock, fear, wonder, and gradually, understanding dawn on thousands of faces. The humans had hidden their true nature not out of deception, but out of wisdom. They had guided us not through force, but through patience. And now, as the greatest threat any of us had ever faced approached, they weren't demanding our allegiance. They were asking for it. Well, I said, my scales shifting to a determined blue. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm rather looking forward to seeing what humans can do when they're not pretending to be primitive. Amanda grinned. Oh, Professor Valérien, you have no idea how long we've waited to show you 3 months after the revelation that turned galactic society upside down. I sat in my new office aboard the human flagship Prometheus, watching stars streak by at speeds I previously thought impossible. Still adjusting to the artificial gravity, Amanda asked, entering with 2 cups of what humans called coffee. A drink that, like their species, was far more potent than it appeared. Still adjusting to everything, I admitted, accepting the cup. Do you know the Galactic University had to rewrite their entire history curriculum? Professor Nexel nearly had a nervous breakdown. How's Director Thal handling her new role? I snorted, nearly spilling my coffee. Being appointed as the Council's liaison to the Human Defense Initiative, she's in bureaucratic heaven. Turns out organizing a galaxy-wide preparation for an alien threat requires mountains of paperwork. Who knew? Amanda settled into a chair that automatically adjusted to her form. More of that casual human technology that they had kept hidden for millennia. And you, having any regrets about accepting the position of Chief Historical Advisor? Are you kidding? My antennae wiggled with excitement. Every day I learned something new about how humans shaped our history. Though I'm still not over the fact that the great temple of Axiom 7 was built because some human archaeologist got drunk and left their tools behind. In their defense, it was really good wine. You're joking again. Please tell me you're joking. That familiar human smile was all the answer I got. The ship's viewport showed our destination approaching. A massive space station unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, at least officially. Its spiral arms stretched out like a welcoming embrace, housing representatives from every known species. Unity Station, Amanda said proudly. The first of many. A place where we can all work together, learn from each other openly now. No more pretending to be primitive, I teased. Well, maybe a little pretending. Some of our scientists really enjoy the look on people's faces when they act surprised by basic quantum mechanics. The station grew larger in our view, its true nature now clear to all. Not just a defensive installation against the approaching devourers, but a symbol of a new age, one where humanity no longer hid in the shadows of history. You know what amazes me most, I said, watching ships from dozens of species dock at the station. Not the hidden technology, or the secret bases, or even the fact that you guided our development for millennia. It's that you genuinely care. You could have ruled us, dominated us. Instead, you chose to help us grow. We learned that lesson the hard way, Amanda replied, her voice turning serious. Power without wisdom is like a ship without navigation. You might be moving fast, but you have no idea where you're going. A notification chimed on my desk. Another discovery by one of our joint research teams, probably. Every day brought new revelations as humans slowly shared more of their archived knowledge. The Devourers will be here within a year, Amanda said quietly. Are you worried? I considered the question, watching the bustling activity around Unity Station. Ships of all species working together, sharing knowledge openly now that the barriers of pretense had fallen. Oddly, no, I replied. Perhaps because I've seen how long humans have been preparing for this. How carefully you've guided us all to this point. Though I do have one question that's been bothering me. Just one. What's Plan N? Amanda laughed, a sound that echoed through the office. Would you believe me if I told you this was Plan N? A curious archaeologist, an ancient moon base, and a galaxy finally ready to face its greatest threat together. That seems a bit too perfect. Sometimes the best plans are the ones that look like coincidence. She stood, checking the time on a device that probably did far more than tell time. Ready for the council meeting? I hear they're finally going to discuss your proposal about updating the galactic dating system. Let me guess. You already know how that vote will go. Professor Valérien, after all this time, do you really think we leave anything to chance? As we walked to the meeting, I noticed my reflection in one of the station's polished walls. My scales had taken on a new pattern lately, one that indicated a contentment I'd never felt before. Here I was, chief advisor to the galaxy's eldest civilization, helping prepare for a threat that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Amanda, I said as we approached the council chambers, when this is all over, assuming we survive. When we survive, she corrected. When we survive, what then? What other secrets have humans been keeping? She paused at the chamber doors, that enigmatic smile playing across her face. Let me put it this way, Professor. Everything you've learned about us so far, that's just humanity's introduction chapter. Wait until you see what we've got planned for the sequel. The doors opened to reveal the council chamber, now transformed into a war room where species that once barely tolerated each other worked side by side, and at the center of it all, humans, finally free to be what they had always been. Not conquerors, not rulers, but the guardians who had watched, waited, and prepared us all for this moment. I couldn't help but smile. The galaxy's greatest joke had turned into its greatest hope, and somehow I had a feeling humans were still keeping the best punchlines for last.